I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to and what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan, your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the hours it takes to get some power. Don't be f***ing sour, take a cold shower. Scream until you're louder, work until you're prouder. And f*** all the doubters, they're just your downers. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought.
I can tell you that 7 years after Freddie Gray, that was 2015, spring, April, May. This is 2022. Communities like Sandtown, all we saw then and now in terms of investment was a renovated Western District Police Station and a new funeral home. That's what West Baltimore got. A new police station and a new funeral home. What kind of optics are they?
Was Freddie Gray any different than 1968 Baltimore riots? Dr. King's passing, killing, murder? Is it the same?
No, it wasn't. I think, well, first of all, people who are being violent and burning, that's the same. But the point is what was the cause and what were they attempting to register?
I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm off at these fucking clowns. They deserve it now. It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown. I swear to God they don't let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. Off at these fucking
First name's Donnie, last name's Glover, in it to win it for the long haul, baby. I want you to pay attention. My father's grandmother was a Blackfoot Indian. Her name was Molly Morton. At least that's the English pronunciation. And she was from South Boston, Virginia. My dad said she could carry a bucket of water in each hand and one on her head and never spill a drop. My mother's father was from Santurce in Puerto Rico, in San Juan. His name was Joaquin Calderon, and he served in the U.S. Navy. Piecing together my family history has been a very fulfilling journey, and despite some experts who suggest that only 2 to 3% of Black people in America have indigenous roots, I've learned to find out my own history for myself. I learned plenty, and that is why I refuse to allow anyone else to define me. I define me. And you should define you. They say that history is written by the victors. As a Black man in America who works in media, I can honestly report that America tends to provide a skewed Hollywood version of American history. It is typically told through the eyes of white America and lacks perspective, depth, and vision, where individuals like Andrew Jackson, $20 bill, are commonly viewed as heroes, and non-whites are characterized as savages. Fact, Black American history did not start with slavery. I need to repeat that. Black American history did not start with slavery. Another fact, the African, the Moor, the Black man has the oldest history on earth. It would be foolish to presume he is anything less than the father of civilization. Yet the wrong glance at the 6 o'clock news can utterly destroy the image of Black excellence in America, let alone in world history. Fact, the oldest DNA is found in southern Africa in Namibia. Mankind spread from there to the four corners of the world. First he walked, and then he sailed. Is it possible that Black people were in the Americas long before the transatlantic slave trade? Is it possible that some of these indigenous Americans were Black? I sure as hell think so. Fact, the oldest bones found in the Americas belong to a woman named Luzia, whose bones were found in Brazil. Her DNA revealed a Black woman who was at least 15,000 years old. Question, did you know that Brazil has 100 million Black people versus the 40 million Black people in the United States? Did you know? Did you know? Did you know? Fact, the 2,500-year-old Olmec heads found in Mexico with thick lips and broad pleptoid noses provide evidence that Africans traveled there before. Ancient paintings found in Mexico also provide insight. Just so you know, you could sail from West Africa into one of those currents and land right into Mexico. And the 450 or so mound pyramids in the Americas. Anyone ever tell you about them? 450 mound pyramids across North America. They certainly leave us with more questions than answers. For example, did the ancient Egyptians travel to North America? Is Kincaid's Cave in the Grand Canyon evidence of an Egyptian presence in North America? I don't know if you've been to Vegas, but that Luxor hotel out there always caused me a lot of questions. America's version of history has always left me with more questions than answers, and that's why I sought out the one and only Tavis RedTail to help bring some clarity to this discussion. Good morning, sir. How are you?
A great day. What a great introduction. First of all, what a great intro to the show. That's a lot to go off of, and I hope that I can and that we can offer your audience a little bit more, because that first 2 minutes is powerful in itself. There's a lot to discuss, a lot to grow on as a community. And so thank you for the hard work and dedication. And then again, your specific intro to the topic today was very informative, right? And enlightening for those that may not be aware of some of the things. And I know we got a little bit of time, but man, we could explore some of those topics.
Tell us about Indidu.
Yes, sir. Indigenous Education is a nonprofit that my mother and I co-founded in 2010. So we've been in operation for a while. Our mission is to educate the public of the omitted history of the brown and dark-skinned indigenous populations of the Americas, particularly of the southeastern portions of the United States. And I guess we could start there, right? And just to piggyback off of your last comment with respects to the Egyptian connection and possibility is interesting enough. Our identified 450 pyramidal mound structures, right? And I'm gonna say identified because my mother and I have found some, right? That they built a QT. I don't know if you know what QT, but QT is a gas station down in the South, right? In Georgia, about 5 minutes from our home in Georgia, there's a gas station built right on top of a mound. And so the 450 identified, and then the rest that we living on, right?
So for those who don't know, a mound pyramid, if you're in Baltimore, Patterson Park to me looks like a mound pyramid. It's a pyramid made of grass.
Of dirt.
Dirt. Grass grows on top of it. Mm-hmm. And many of the ones we see in North America, you would say would be the bottom half of a pyramid.
For sure. Well, for the most part, they've knocked down the biggest ones. We have one called Big Mound in St. Louis, if I'm not mistaken. And so they actually have a plaque for Big Mound. Big Mound would have been the biggest mound and the second largest mound in North America. This mound now is about the size is smaller than a piano. And they used that dirt to build the railroads of America. And
Hold
so
on, we got some experts chiming in. There's a mound pyramid in West Point, Mississippi, 10 Cup Alley. We appreciate you. About 15 minutes from where they are.
Most cities. So you think about this from a human perspective, and let's get back to the topic, right? We're talking about civilizations that have been existing around the world, civilizations that have been in development around the world, and they say that the savages of the Americas were uncivilized up to the time of European contact, and then they distort the history.
These are Europeans.
These are European concepts and mainstream educational theories.
They call the people, the indigenous peoples who lived here when they got here, the same people who fed them, who showed them how to plant corn.
Mm.
They call them savages. Who
showed them how to advance their number one cash crop that made the United States what it is: tobacco. And so the conversation
people were savages.
These people were savages.
Now, because they're savages, that means you can go there, you can rape their women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can enslave them.
You can enslave them.
And most importantly, you can conquer their lands.
You can conquer their lands. And they are the savages.
Yes, right. And actually, there was a concept called the noble savage that was developed in the 18th century, which was a concept where some of the European elitists developed a theory that these individuals were highly civilized to a degree and had, and to some degree, a higher level of governance than the European did. However,
right here in these Americas,
it was the first international debate about the Americas. It was called the Great Debate. If anyone's interested in learning more context about how the colonizers, particularly the elitists, were viewing the relationships between the indigenous communities, their chiefdoms, and their aristocratic style of governance and communication. Understand there was a system in place here. There was a governing structure in place. And while some of the Europeans wanted to work along with that governing structure in order to establish a more fluid connection, others saw it as an opportunity to enslave and pillage. And so there was a debate that occurred during the 18th century called the Great Debate, where both sides were arguing that point to the king. No decision was ever made. However, it's really important because during that time, slavery was postponed and other things were postponed so that the European governing ship could try to wrap their head around a lot of the misinformation that they were receiving from pirates, right? From soldiers or adelantados that were skewing the information in order to receive, their goods, their services. Everybody was trying to get rich.
I've come out with a book, I Am Black Wall Street. I wanted to look at how those Black people got to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Back then it was called Indian Territory. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that the first Blacks in Oklahoma came out of Florida.
Interesting topic, right? And so think about you spoke about it earlier where we talk about every human on this world has a DNA that can directly tie back to Central Africa, and that these individuals would have migrated across the planet coming from out of that central location. The description of that migration is always north and east, never west. Now, in order to go north, sometimes they got to pass water. In order to go east, sometimes they got to pass water. But when they go westward, they get to the water and then they become dumb. Those individuals become unable to move beyond that point while all of the rest of humanity is moving. That's the mainstream theory. And that individuals didn't get to the continent of the Americas until about 15,000 years ago through the Bering Strait. And
that's one way.
That's the one way that they came during that time. However, there, like you said, we have Eva, who was found in the Yucatan, that dates between 15 and 17, along with a few other bones, as you suggested. These individuals having a Negro phenotype, which would suggest that a Negro was inhabiting the Americas prior to that Bering Strait theory. And again, recognizing that they have found evidence of human sediment in South Carolina, specifically, actually where I'm from, that dates back to 50,000 years, 51,500 to be exact, which is actually the dates that they would offer that migration out of Central America going everywhere. So it makes sense. And so now what you do is you have a civilization that have been existing on the continent, particularly from where? The southeastern portions of the United States, Georgia, Florida, Virginia, South Carolina, right? And then that growth spurt out of that specific area or region, right? Recognizing that now that we can identify that there was a culture existing here, we can also acknowledge that, wait a second, there were other cultures. We had the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Olmecs of Central Americas. However, those dates coincide with this already pre-existing culture in the southeastern portions of the United States. And the artifacts that they would find, and specifically in Etowah. Let's talk about Etowah Mounds, which is in Etowah, Georgia. It's about an hour and a half north. EWTOW.
ETOWAH.
ETOWAH. I wanted to make sure I spelled it right. Got my mama over here listening. That mound, they found artifacts. They call it the bird man. This bird man is actually similar in style type as some of the artifacts of the Mayan culture. And so now they can acknowledge that these two cultures were intermingling with each other. And that,
did you see the paintings of the Mayans?
Yes.
I mean, I see a lot of melanin. I saw a lot of melanin. You cannot mistake melanin. You have it or you don't. The paintings I saw were black.
Right.
By today's standards, I mean, America says 1 drop of black blood. They got melanated faces. And
Yes.
You're not going to tell me they came through the Bering Strait. I refuse to believe it. I don't care who you are, including the famous Harvard professor.
Well, again, all of these things date back prior to that particular migration. And so, acknowledging this conversation is just acknowledging the reality that we're not talking about a specific group of people. We're talking about an excluded group of individuals. Also, just to make sure that I piggyback off of where we started from, recognizing that the La Venta complex, which is in Mexico, it is a dirt pyramid also, right? And also a few other of the other pyramidal structures down in the Yucatan area. One of them mirrored the Egyptian pyramids directly, literally to the angles and to the actual structures built. And so the conversation, when we're discussing, when we're acknowledging the melanated individuals of the Americas prior to even the 14,000 years ago Bering Strait migration, we have to acknowledge the contact and the pretext that these civilizations are marrying each other around the world. And so contact has to have been made between these various governments maybe, or culture, if you want to try to dumb down, people use culture instead of government when they're speaking about history, as if we have the best and the most, lavish of lifestyles, when in actuality, that we still are unable to do things that these individuals were doing. And again, recognizing that that the pyramids of some of the uh, uh, Yucatan and Mosaic period historical landscape mirrors other landscapes around the world. There's a larger conversation to be had from that perspective. However, I guess the conversation for me would be like, well, wait a second, what happened to these people? Because historically, particularly in the Southeast, where I like to pay attention to, again, first of all, I'm from the Southeast, right? And then the history of the Southeast is totally omitted out of American history.
Let me share something with you. They don't tell us that, and closer to these times, that if you were black and you were in Florida and you made it to Florida, if you were enslaved and you made it to Florida prior to 1831, you could get your freedom. Why? Right. Spain owned Florida.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And
France owned Louisiana.
Mm-hmm. And then you had the British, not until 1600s, but then you have the British taking dominance in the Northeast. So
originally it was the Portuguese and the Spanish dominating the slave trade. The Johnny-come-latelys were the British.
Yes, sir. 100 and over, almost 150 years later.
So 1619 is dead wrong.
Well, that's a conversation to be had.
I've counted it to be 1500s or so, when a Spanish slaver came to North America right around South Carolina. He had some slaves. They beat him up.
Yep.
and they rolled out into what we now call the Gullah Islands.
Interesting. If I may, I have had the opportunity, my mother and I have had the opportunity over the last few months to engage with an organization, Red Feather's Legacy, and the lead individual, Tammy Walking-Stick Riley, as she is organizing a Native American center, here in Philadelphia. And I've had the opportunity to engage with Red Feather's Legacy as they've been in incubation with Philadelphia 250. Why is this conversation important to us? Philadelphia 250 is a campaign that's happening here in Philadelphia to acknowledge the 250th year anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which is going to be coming up in a few years, in 2026, as a matter of fact. We were able to offer some information to the organization and to the stakeholders last week as we presented our pitch, from a group perspective for Feathers Legacy team. And as a part of our educational information, we were able to share with the collective, and we hope that this makes a difference, that in 2026, while we're celebrating the 250th year anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, very important to me personally. I feel like that's a very important date. We're also going to be living through the 500-year anniversary of the attempted establishment of the first colony here in the United States. And so from an indigenous perspective, right, recognizing that, that as a collective group of people, melanated individuals, our history has been literally taken from us and replaced with a partial history that removes our identity from this land. It was important for us to notify them that while we can commemorate a very, very important date, I'd rather have who we have now than Russia or China, personally. Iran even, right? I'd rather have what we have now and then try to improve on our situation. There's a lot that we have to do as a nation to acknowledge the historical misnomers, the omissions, and
I would have to speak out China or Russia for myself, because I only know what other people have told me. and I'm not at all putting them on a pedestal, but we know these racists right here, and they haven't changed in 250 years. And so wherever I can get some enlightenment, some intelligence, I'm always open to the conversation. But I would imagine you have forces of darkness wherever you go. There are people,
wherever you go.
I mean, blacks were in Asia.
Well, we fight against each other, which is why we're in the situation that we're in right now.
We're forced to fight against each other.
Yes.
We're pitted against each other.
So
before we even get to know the Nigerian, someone has told him about us and us about him. So when I meet a Nigerian, I've shared it on the show. I'm going to ask him, are you Yoruba, Igbo, Edda, Eka, or Hausa? Because quite often a Nigerian, the 200 million, those are like 5 of the top higher numbered tribes. We have to know more about where we come from. Both Africa, both indigenous, and those of us who have roots elsewhere. They don't tell us in history, for instance, that the first king of Hawaii was a black man, King Kamehameha. I know I messed his name up, but the people in Hawaii know who I'm talking about. The black man with the afro. Fiji, they got some of the biggest afros on the planet in Fiji. You know they black.
Well, and again, if we remove that history, then it's easy to distract, to divide et impera, right? Divide and rule, right? And which is
everybody want to rule. What are they gonna do? They done destroyed the planet. They already talking about going and trashing another planet. I mean, rule what? They don't make the sun come up. Don't make no moonshine. Can't control none of the rain. Control what? You got all the money in the world, now what? You still got hungry people. We got hungry children in Kenya right now.
Well, you know, I don't think that we're the people. I don't think we're the people that they think about when they think about space.
Let them take their butts on out there and just don't come back.
Well, from an indigenous perspective, right, of having to acknowledge our current state of existence, particularly as a Black man, right, and that shared relationship between the Black community and that lost historical identity, whether you think I'm Black or you think I'm Indian, right? Because we've had a collective come in and
determine who is Indian and who is not.
To begin with,
I talk about that in this book about what happened to the blacks who got out to Oklahoma. That's where they come up with the term $5 Indians. The what they call it, the Dawes roll.
Right. Well, you know before
the Dawes roll, you got 5 white guys sitting at a desk and say, Tavis, you are Indian, Donnie, you are not. Huh?
That's where the paper bags test started to come into play. That's where the pen and the hair test started to come into play.
Explain what these are.
And so again, as the Dawes rolls, as this commission of individuals that the United States,
white individuals
determining who is and who isn't an Indian per se. They're trying to establish a 2-pronged society. Either you're white or you're Black. If you're Black, you're a slave, period. And so
even if you were Indian, you're Black.
See, now again, remember, under what bracket would the Indians have been placed? Colored. Particularly, I'm from so half of my family is from Virginia, right? And there's a history of our people specifically not wanting. We started intermarrying into our cousins because we didn't want outside influences to detract from our so-called indigenousness, right? However, doing that now imagine having that happen in every community everywhere, right? And then they say, well, no, I don't want to be Negro because Negro means that you African.
What about the white people who claim to be Indian?
Well, again, so first of all,
so they say none of y'all are Indian.
None of us are Indian.
Then here come Peter and Karen talking about they Indian.
What happens when you do that? You control the land. Because what happens if black people are Indian?
You know, a thief is a thief.
What happens in
I don't
law
care
right
what
now?
label, what religion, what color, you're a thief. You stole. It wasn't yours.
So what can we do now?
A thief is a thief.
Right. So what we do now is to tell the truth and not be afraid of that truth. And particularly amongst our population, because it doesn't matter to anyone else what happened before 1619, except to the people that existed here before 1619. And so who's going to tell that story?
Tavis, that's not held. In my research, I learned about a community in America in the 1300s that was utterly destroyed. Well, it utterly disappeared. There's no trace of them.
Mm-hmm. Well,
have you run across that?
So yes and no. Again, when you're connected to the environment, there's a relationship with that space, and acknowledgement that there's only a certain amount of time that humans will be able to exist on a particular part of this land before they deplete their resources and they need to move forward in order for the lands to replenish themselves. And so a lot of the historical, extinction of individuals were actually migrations of communities in order to stay in harmony and in order to keep what they consider to be the honeypot of the world, that, right? And so extinction is a historical term that is mislabeled, and we really need to take a look again at indigenous communities instead of the perception or the description of these indigenous communities by colonizers, by enslavers, by individuals that are only interested in perpetuating their system. So anything that's not their system is less than.
Tavis, I want you to talk to Black people. I have met many Black people who have told me of their indigenous roots. I don't know if you noticed, we got some feedback. You got some background noise there.
That's them working on the house next door.
Okay, just wanted to know. But there are those of us who our grandmothers tell us, our grandfathers tell us, they tell us you have Blackfoot Indian, you have this, you have that, and we don't follow up on it. We don't write it down. Grandma dies, great-grandma dies, and we don't know what to pass on to our great-grandchildren. And then Harvard will pay a noted Black historian money to say that only 2 to 3% of us have indigenous blood.
Mm-hmm.
What is your message to Black people about indigenous roots?
The first thing that I would like to acknowledge is that they don't test any of the southeastern indigenous peoples when they're asking about the DNA. Eastern tribe in general. There are no Eastern tribes DNA in the database to whom would be
Ancestry.com.
Any of them.
They don't have it. So if I'm indigenous, don't look for Ancestry.com or any of the other ones to say you are.
Right. They don't test the blood from that region in order to add it to that.
So they have
mix.
no samples.
They have no samples. And they don't want to have a sample.
No, they don't want to have no sample.
What would happen if they have a sample? The Smithsonian Institute, 1890.
Did you say thief?
Yes. Their report. Yes. Thief? The Smithsonian Institute's 19th annual report of the Bureau of American Ethnology. So their books, they say a considerable portion of the blood of the Negro is Indian.
The Smithsonian is okay. Come on. I'll cut you off. You got me pumped up now. The coffee kicking in.
When the system itself tells you that a population has a considerable amount of a specific type of blood, but won't allow that collective group to be identified as that. There's nothing else to be had with a conversation to them except to continue to push the facts in their face, and then have that larger conversation with the Black community in general. You can be African, you can be Pan-African,
But
you
you
can
can't
be
be a Black
Christian,
Indian.
but and why is that? And then also, why is it that when I try to present these conversations to even the Black elitists at various colleges and universities,
Like Harvard.
I'm muddying the waters.
Like Harvard. It's got, for them, you from Africa or you not.
Period.
There's no way you can be from Africa and have indigenous American lineage.
See, and that was done purposefully, because what happens is
By people with no damn history at all.
And then the laws that are established are able to continue to hide that fact, and then
laws,
and then
sounds
the collectives
to me.
Then the indigenous peoples become immigrants, and they lose all of their rights that belong to them as an indigenous collective. And so the conversation is to be had amongst the Black community. Yes, I have some African in me. I have some white blood in me. I have a considerable portion of my blood is indigenous. And so with that comes responsibilities to my ancestors, responsibilities to my obligations to that structure that was in place prior to the colonization. However, if I choose to be indigenous, then it's my obligations to uphold the rights.
And nobody got a damn thing to say about it.
Can nobody? And the United States acknowledges that if you handle yourself correctly.
Now, the Moors, I've watched Moors effectively navigate this American system. I don't know if you're familiar with the Moorish Americans, but
I'm aware of them.
Yeah, well, they don't play with the courts, and by the time they get finished with a judge, the judge is gonna need an Advil PM and a timeout, and gonna take the rest of the day off and probably go to happy hour and get drunk because they can't handle the Moors in court. Once the Moors get to cooking in court, it's all over.
I would say organization is key for us all as a community. For us to bring our various skill sets to the table. Whether it be media or law or community engagement, and then talk to our youth and say, we haven't showed them anything that is sustainable. We lost, particularly here in Philadelphia, we had a lot of various cultural communities that had whole blocks where people would be able to go and engage, feel safe, possibly, if that's what they interest was, grow their own foods and various things like that, police that particular neighborhood. And since the 70s, once crack came, that was it for our community, and so I'm interested in engaging with individuals to ask for us, particularly my age group, as we are now starting to step into more responsible roles of leadership as the elders are given that to us. There was a purpose behind boycotting, and it was not just to boycott, but we also said, we're going to set up our own bus systems, and that's what they're afraid of more than anything else. Our opportunity to be able to organize ourselves and offer ourselves services, and like the food program from Black Panther Party, right? And what they call it, community health centers, all of these things that we used to offer to ourselves that we now complain about, but we ain't doing it.
So in conclusion, your message to Black people: learn your history. Don't let anybody tell you who you are. Go find out what your grandmother and your great-grandmother and your great-great-grandfather told you. Go research it. Go find your cousins. Go get connected.
What good would it do for your grandma to lie about who you are? And if your grandma always told you, don't you forget, boy, you this. Maybe it's time for us to take a look at grandma and see why was that important. and maybe we can, gift her dream that opportunity to come into fruition for our people to be, self-determining.
How did you become interested in your history?
Interesting. Long story short, grew up in private school, speaking a different language. 5th grade, started public school. I look different. I talk different, right? I'm still learning how to speak the language. I ain't black today. Nobody in my class. Walking home with dad one day. Dad, like, they keep telling me I ain't black. Like, what's up with that? I look just like them if you ask me. I know I'm from here. He said, well, boy, it's like this. You were Indian. And they grouped us with the black people and made us all forget who we was. And when I had my daughter, I just happened to run into, this is 1999, picking her out the car. I found the document laid on the backseat of the truck. My dad's an educator, my mom's educators. It was the rights of indigenous peoples. And I saw the opportunity for us to have safety and being able to share our stories. And so that empowered me to be able to have people be able to acknowledge that, listen, we are black, but our ancestry is more than just what they tell us. And so if I could just share that with people.
Trying to tell them, Tavis, that our history is more than what I don't want somebody else to tell me my history. We have enough context clues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ancestry.com does have some usefulness.
Yes.
It ain't the Bible, because we know the devil created it, but they got to use some truth in it in order to get us hooked.
Right. And so it's important for us.
Look, they can tell us, oh, you from this tribe in Africa, but you have no collection of black Indian DNA in America.
They have no collection. We won't even say black. They don't have a collection of Indian blood anywhere on the East Coast. Because, again, acknowledging that they were all various skin tones.
Base. That's our base.
That's our
closest
base.
To Africa, closest to South America.
Closest to what? The base is the Native American community west of the Mississippi. We'll ignore everything east of the Mississippi, although their history may be 10, 15, 30,000 years older. And that population is a population that we interacted with when they first got here. Again, real quick, we were still building pyramidal mounds in the 1700s. What happened to those people and what happened to that science? Because they can't build it and neither can we now. But 300 years ago,
they were
Native Americans, we were still building it 300 years ago. So it's not that far removed.
I got a pop quiz question for you. You just mentioned something and it sparked me. It sparked some thoughts. I have read about, are you ready? I've read about the Mississippians.
Oh, yes. The Mississippian. So the Mississippian mound builders, that's the culture that they turned to be. That's what eventually they would call the Mississippian mound builders.
Now, this has nothing to do with the past 400 years of America. We're talking about before the European got here. The Mississippians were indigenous peoples that lived along that mighty, powerful river.
They were also connected to the larger Muskogee, now called Muskogee Indian tribes that were the melanated collective indigenous peoples of the southeastern portions of the United States.
And they had cities.
Cahokia Mound Complex, look it up, is in St. Louis, Missouri.
Yes.
St. Louis, Missouri, was larger than London at the same time. With trade, so in St. Louis, you have artifacts of shark teeth from the shores of Pennsylvania. You have artifacts from as far south as Florida, and you have artifacts from down into the Gulf. And so you can show over into Wisconsin. My mom wanted to make sure that y'all know. And so what we have is civilization, y'all, and not savage civilizations. Again, they were bigger than London at the same time.
They weren't shark teeth in Pennsylvania shores.
So here's some of the comments. This is from Robert. Many of the county names in Mississippi are named after Native American tribes. My county is called Octibeha.
Yeah, we have many.
It's from Tina Branch. Yes, you are right. They did marry into American Indians. Blackfoot, 13 country over the water has been going over as long as America existed. History of America in the South.
Very true.
Please be sure to put your contact information. And this
Okay.
is one more from Robert. I was told in the past that Mississippi reached from Louisiana to Florida. Okay, so you want to put a website up?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to do that. INDEDU.org. We have a lot of information, and we're really excited. We started our television program up again, discussions with Indigenous education. And so you can follow us at INDEDU.org or An American Deception on YouTube. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Tell them about your mom.
Yes. So
she's taking off today somewhat.
She's making sure I get all the info correct in the background, as y'all can hear. So my mother is she's an educator, 35 years in the profession, both public and private in Atlanta and in Philadelphia. She's the co-founder of our nonprofit, Indigenous Education. She's the writer of 2 published books, Revealing America's Dark-Skinned Past, Volume 1, and Revealing America's Dark-Skinned Past, Volume 2, the Columbian Era, available on Amazon. She's also the writer and a co-publisher of 3 documentaries, Brown, Black, and White, Race and Native Americans, the Native American Slave Trade, and the Mound Builders.
Now, I want you to tell us about this famous rapper that's going around pretending to be you.
Who's that? You talk about
a rapper named Snoop Dogg, and damn if he don't look like you.
I wasn't sure which one you were going to. I get that, and then I get Nipsey too a lot. And so
you get Nipsey also too,
all the time. But I'm thankful. Indigenous peoples are indigenous peoples, right? And I know Nipsey's from Ethiopia. We can acknowledge the Ethiopian slave trade and the.
You can learn in Ethiopia too.
Yeah, Native Americans were shipped to Ethiopia as part of the slave trade too, and so
what?
There's the slave trade started when Christopher Columbus took Native Americans back on his first trip, and they winded up in the Mediterranean slave trade. And the reason why it was important for him to take the slaves back was so that he could show that he ran into a new people, that these people that he wasn't lying. And that's how he got funded for his second and third trip. Remember,
by Spain and Portugal.
Right. Remember, slaves are, you make more money with slaves than with gold. And they knew that.
Also, I lost my train of thought. Portugal and Spain financed them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know what I wanted to tell you. What was going on prior to Christopher Columbus, Spain and Portugal becoming the leaders of the slave trade? What was happening in Spain and Portugal just before that?
Well, again, the Moors.
The Moors were dominating. The Moors dominated that whole Iberian Peninsula for 800 years.
And so
if there were any ships that Isabella and Ferdinand clipped after they moved into the Alhambra, best believe Moors were driving those ships.
Yeah, and again, acknowledging that the slave trade itself was the vessel and the vehicle that drove the commerce of that time period. And,
can you imagine the audacity of somebody being mad because they can't own you and they can't because they won't do their own damn work, they won't nurse their own children? Can you imagine somebody getting mad because you refuse to do that for them for free, what they should be doing their damn self? But now, 200 years later, some of these people are Republicans, now that they'd have benefited off of free labor, and still have the audacity to have an old funky, You lucky your mama here, because I'd be cussing by now. Got old funky Confederate flag waving around, and then they're going around killing people. And then we taking on this behavior. You see them 6 people, what they did to this young girl?
Yeah. Well, and yeah, like you said, this was really important for us to continue to engage on shows like this, right? Because, I was interested enough that they say we didn't read, and I asked people to write things down, and they say we didn't write as a community as Black people didn't write. Okay, well, that's a misnomer. That's a lie. It's historical documentation to verify that even
tell them go to the walls of Karnak, where those Africans wrote down the holy scriptures, out of which Judaism, Christianity, and Islam come from.
Right.
Tell them go back to Mother Africa and get the real coffee. Yeah. Tell them get that black coffee, because they've been drinking too much cappuccino with froth and stuff on top.
Be careful, CRT. and actually, that's an issue that Indigenous education is concerned with, because it limits our opportunities to engage.
What do you mean?
Well, critical race theory, right? And the limitation of the opportunity to discuss a larger historical perspective of how this continent how this nation was founded.
How it was stolen?
Well, how it was established.
Invaded?
Yes.
How it was filled with disease like smallpox.
Mm-hmm. And however, again, as we're discussing these things, from a Black perspective, that's
and call somebody a savage.
And now, what do we do with that, right? The noble savage, as I like to call myself.
I live here in West Baltimore. Every day on the news, they show squeegee kids on the corner trying to make $1. And white people and Black people complain about these squeegee kids. What is not on the news are the white addicts now harboring in the Black community everywhere.
Panhandling
like savages.
Panhandling too.
Yeah. When a white guy comes up to my vehicle in the Black community asking for change, the humanity comes out of me. I'm still a human being. I'm not cruddy. But it certainly makes me wonder why Donald Trump doesn't see this. See, Donald Trump is stoking a fear. You see it on social media where certain white folks are afraid that Black people are going to clap back. If that's your fear, then stop treating people greasy.
And that's been 200 years, 300 years.
Why can't you stop treating people greasy? Why do you charge Black people more for car insurance, for mortgages? You think that's cool?
You're talking about systematic. Now we're talking systems now, right? And why it's really important for us
is a thief. They done locked up all these Black men across America for a bag of weed. Now white people selling weed got a license.
And getting rich too.
And getting rich. But a Black brother over to jail for an ounce of weed.
You know how much it cost? And even with that, the capitalism with that, because it costs $250,000 to apply to be a dispensary. And so who has $250 in West Philadelphia or in West Baltimore?
You telling me you're afraid that I'm going to clap back on you. If you're afraid, then stop treating my people greasy. But you can't, because you're sick, because you're greedy. You want everything and you don't want me to have nothing. And it's not going to go down like that. I'm serious, man. It's a guy running around Hollywood who is looking just like you, man.
Oh, man. Well,
go get your money, man.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I tell him, I said, holla at you. I want to see. And you know what? Somebody said I kind of look like Nips. And what I want to do is say, listen, to us as a collective, his mission, his goal, respecting that man, for people to continuously name me. I hope that the mission that I'm on with respects to community involvement, community engagement, and opportunities for our youth to see something better will increase, right? And as we men begin to, model from, individuals like my man Don right here, and take these opportunities to self-engage and have that self-motivation. We can, so one day at a time, one person at a time.
My last question for you is, have you seen the video Kendrick Lamar did called The Heart Part 5?
I have not. I have to check it out.
Oh my God. Are you down with Kendrick Lamar?
I am. I just don't watch much TV or music videos. You
gotta see this video, The Heart Part 5, Kendrick Lamar. I'm a certified fan now.
All right.
Young man is brilliant.
Well, I'm happy for you.
Hey, he's a really brilliant young man. I'm glad I took the time to listen to his music. What is your, so parlaying further into this last question, what is your message to the young people?
There's opportunity for us all, and they've allowed money to be the root cause of our conversation, of our discernment, of our decision-making process. However, when you find something that you love to do, when you find something that you want to engage with, and you want to make something better, you want to offer your mom opportunity, your children opportunity, your brothers opportunity, then the Great Spirit, God, Allah, a higher power will offer that opportunity for you to engage. And so what I like to just share to the community is, I grew up in the 90s here in Philadelphia. They called it Philadelphia. Murder ain't nothing close to what it was back then. However, so many of us are concerned and scared. I want to just acknowledge that we are getting better. And as our youth have way more opportunities to engage and develop than we did. And we as young individuals turning into mature adults have great opportunities to learn from that hurt that we went through, and to offer opportunities to engage with our particular community, but also to educate the larger community. There's a developmental path for us moving forward. We have to engage, we have to stay diligent, and we can't give up. And so, if anything, I like to say engage. If you see something and you don't see nobody doing anything about it, it's because you're just supposed to be the one that's supposed to do about it. So go run for your local offices, go run for your local races, put people in there that you can depend on, that's going to think about us as a community, and let's start forcing our hand and making our space better, because we're the ones making that decision.
And one thing I always wanted? I wanted one of them full feathered Indian headdresses, man. And one of them Indians from the Burn Strait told me I couldn't wear one.
You wouldn't want to wear one if you knew the correct history. So real quick, I think I got 3 minutes on our website. On our YouTube,
want one.
If you knew the correct history, you wouldn't want one.
Well, I don't want one now. I trust you. I trust you.
American history in the late 1800s, when they were developing their money, they had some of the most elaborate print monies that they came up with. Some of them were of Native Americans. They took the war bonnet, which is the headdress that you're speaking about. They took the war head bonnet from a rival tribe and put it on an assimilated tribe's chief and took that picture. And so, it's manipulative. It's conniving. It caused more issues between various
type thing.
Divide and conquer. And again, that wasn't even worn here on the East Coast at all. And so even the Indigenous and Native American community, we all have been educated by colonizers. And so 90% of what we know about each other and about ourselves is incorrect. Like you said, it's time for us to start educating ourselves.
If you pick up a copy of my book, I Am Black Wall Street, there's no way you can talk about Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and not know about the Black Indians that came out of Florida under Chief John Horse. That was the hero. He led them blacks all the way to Oklahoma, got out there. The American government treated him like a second-class citizen, and he took his 200 black soldiers, not slaves, on the Trail of Tears, soldiers, not slaves, from Florida, not slaves. He took them to Oklahoma, didn't like it. Then he went to Texas, and then he went to Mexico. And just for the record, While Oklahoma has 70 to 80 black towns, Texas had 500 in East Texas alone. We must know our history. We must do our research. Many thank yous to you, Tavis, and also to your moms. I'm proud of you. And this has been 2 years you've been coming on the show. We got to get you back whenever you'd like.
Thank you so much for allowing us to continue to engage and share this platform for Indigenous peoples and Black Indians. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. May peace be unto you. Good morning, world.